sponsors, even corporations, saying we see them, offer a better direction, and when appropriate, acknowledge a job well done. Sign up today at afaaction.net.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to a brand new broadcast edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, your host. Congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent, as always. Rob Gardner in the house. Guarantee you that the absentee Jeff Reed is effervescent today. He's out where Rob and I would like to be, out playing golf. Yeah, and it's for a good cause. It's for a charitable thing, so we'll give Jeff the day off for that purpose. Anyway, good to have you in the audience today, in the conversation today. Want to remind you that you never need to miss a broadcast edition of Focal Point. We have podcasts available at afr.net, afr.net. Go there and get a podcast of any program that airs on AFR, and you can do that with Focal Point as well. Also, you can find podcasts of my daily minutes. I do a daily feature, a Life and Liberty Minute. There's 3 times in a network. You can get the podcast of that right there as well. Also, don't forget you can live stream Focal Point on our Focal Point Facebook page. You can live stream it on our YouTube channel. Email us at focalpoint@afa.net. And don't forget, getting close to Father's Day, maybe not too late. If you get an order in today, get it by Father's Day, of the Boy to Man book. You can get that at afastore.net, afastore.net. Well, I'm going to depart a little bit, given where we're at as a nation. I'm going to depart a little bit from our scheduled Bible reading and prayer today, which has us in the end of 1 Corinthians 15. Great section about the resurrection of Christ and all that, baptism for the dead. I was going to talk about that today. We'll have to save that for another day. But given where we're at, in light of this Supreme Court ruling yesterday, which is a gut shot to those of us in the pro-family, pro-marriage, pro-natural marriage community who believe in sexual morality, who believe in biblical standards of sexual expression, and believe that that should be honored in our public policy. This is a gut shot to have Neil Gorsuch go completely off reservation, along with John Roberts, gone over to the dark side of the force and join the people that are trying to tear down the pillars of our culture. Remember, when the pillars collapse, what do the righteous do? Well, now we have people that we thought were on our side. We elected President Trump to give us jurists, Supreme Court justices, who would not do this to us. And now it's too late. Now we've got 2 of them that are renegade, completely off the reservation, completely outside the bounds of the law, outside the bounds of the Constitution, outside the bounds even of the dictionary. And now they're going to make rulings because we've allowed the Supreme Court to have an authority. It's nowhere given in the Constitution. They've assumed it to themselves. They've arrogated it to themselves, and we have continued meekly to submit to this. Remember, 29 states do not have laws that give special rights on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. They have the same constitutional rights that everybody else does, but not special rights. That's what Neil Gorsuch and John Roberts did yesterday. They gave special rights to sexual orientation and gender identity groups. It's just nuts. And they've elevated these things over religious liberty. There is no right to engage in homosexuality or transgenderism in the Constitution. It's just not there anywhere. There is a right, however, an explicit right in the Constitution to the free exercise of religion. And it's as if that doesn't even exist. And they've elevated something that has no status at all in the Constitution. None, zero, zip, nada, zilch. And they've elevated that to the same stature of the free exercise of religion, which was the first constitutional right, the first indispensable right, the first inalienable right that God gave us, according to the Declaration and the Constitution. So it's a dark day, ladies and gentlemen, in American history, because we are going to have to deal with the effect of this misbegotten ruling. This is a horrible, no good, very bad, terrible ruling on the part of the Supreme Court. And now we are going to be stuck dealing with the ramifications of this, the aftershocks of this, literally for decades. Because once the Supreme Court issues a ruling, it's not true, not right, there's no basis for it in American jurisprudence or law or the Constitution, that becomes the law of the land. They even had Chuck Grassley today, Senator Grassley, who used to be the chairman of the Judiciary Committee that's responsible to find people that will uphold the Constitution. He said this is now the law of the land. Ladies and gentlemen, he's the head of the Judiciary Committee. This is nuts, because it is impossible that a Supreme Court ruling could ever be the law of the land. Why? Because Article 1, Section 1 says this. I've read it to you many times, but emblazon it on your brain. We need to memorize this. We need to hold to it. We need to cling to it. Article 1, Section 1, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested where? In a Supreme Court of the United States of America? In the President of the United States of America? No, shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. Where do all legislative powers reside? Read it with me, ladies and gentlemen. In the Congress of the United States. Does not reside in the Supreme Court. So according to the Constitution, since all legislative powers are vested where? In a Congress of the United States of America, how much legislative power does that leave for the Supreme Court? The answer is zero. Zip, nada, zilch, none. The Supreme Court is constitutionally prohibited from writing legislation, but that's exactly what they did from the bench yesterday, and this is the whole reason we elected Donald Trump, is to stop this kind of insanity, this kind of nonsense, this kind of legislating from the bench, to stop it, and now we're stuck with it for decades. That's enough to make a grown man such as myself pull my hair out. And before we do that, why don't we turn to the Word of God? I want to read from Ephesians 6, and we'll pray from Ephesians 6, because this is where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, this is a dark day. Not the end. I'm not saying it's all over. I'm saying this is a dark day in American history. You know, we've had a series of these just in the last 20 years when the Supreme Court legitimized the criminal act of sodomy in 2003, and then they legitimized and compelled the United States of America to accept the legitimacy of sodomy-based marriages in 2015, and now they have compelled every employer in America to hire people who are so confused sexually that they think they were born in the wrong body. So, I mean, this is just nuts on steroids. I mean, I don't know where else they can go from here to make things worse. And realize what this means. With this ruling where they have applied the 1964 Civil Rights Protection, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex. Repeat that after me. It prohibits sexual discrimination on the basis of sex. Not a mention in there of sexual orientation, not a mention in there of gender identity. Those are not protected classes under the Civil Rights Act of 1964. You know, if Congress wants to grant special rights to those classes, they can change the law to do it. They haven't done it. They have tried repeatedly, and they've never been able to do it. Tried to pass the Equality Act. They've been trying that for 13 years, ever since Obama became president. They have failed every single time. Now they got what they could not get through the constitutional means of getting a law through Congress. They've now gotten that by judicial fiat. This is judicial tyranny. This is a judge tyrannically, despotically directing the affairs of America's public life from the bench. Well, let's go to Ephesians chapter 6, because that's what we're dealing with. We're going to read Ephesians chapter 6, and then we are going to pray this back to God. Finally, he says, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. So we are to find our strength, we are to find our might, our resilience, our perseverance, our endurance in the Lord. He has mighty strength. He's available in response to our faith and our prayers to infuse us with his strength so that we can be strong in a day like today. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. One of the schemes of the devil is to get a culture to approve of, to endorse, to protect, to give special rights to sodomy. This is what the founders called the crime against nature. For the founders, this was a crime. It was a crime against nature, because even nature tells us that this is wrong and fundamentally unnatural. So we're in a day like this where we have to stand against the schemes of the devil. The scheme he's working on right now is the scheme of the legitimacy, the normalization of unnatural sexual behavior. For, Paul says in verse 12, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. So our ultimate enemy, ladies and gentlemen, this is not Neil Gorsuch. He's an adversary, no question about it. Used to be an ally, now he's an adversary, but the enemy here is Satan. He's the puppet master behind the scenes, pulling Gorsuch's string, playing him like a puppet. He's the guy that we need to worry about, the Satan who is behind Neil Gorsuch and John Roberts. Therefore, verse 13, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand, to stand firm in the evil day. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an evil day. How do we stand firm against this scheme of the devil? Not give way to it, not endorse it, not accept it, not agree with it, no matter what kind of pressure comes against us, by putting on the whole armor of God. That's how we stand firm in the evil day. Stand firm, therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, wearing the scriptures like a belt around our waist. Put on the breastplate of Christ's righteousness, and righteousness in conduct and behavior, and as shoes for your feet, putting on the readiness given by the gospel of peace, so we're ready at any moment to defend the truth of God's word in all circumstances. Take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one. All of the fiery arrows he fires at us, we can raise up against him the shield of our faith, and that will stop the flaming missiles of the evil one. The sword of the Spirit is the word of God. He says, pray at all times. Here's the key. Pray at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication. So 3 times Paul hammers that we do this through prayer. We put on the armor of God. We use the armor of God. We stand firm against the devil. How do we do that? We do that through prayer. Well, if you'd be kind enough, let's go to prayer. This is important stuff. Would you pray with me? Lord Jesus, I beg of you, I beseech you, by your Spirit, that we will be strong in you and in your mighty strength. I pray that we will grasp the truth that our struggle in life is not against flesh and blood, but against unseen powers, the rulers, the authorities, the cosmic powers of this dark world, the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. I pray that each one of us will put on the full armor of God so that we may be able to stand against the devil's schemes. When the evil day comes and we find ourselves under extraordinary pressure, may we stand our ground. And after we have done everything you ask us to, may we continue to stand firm. Let us stand firm with the belt of your truth buckled around our waist, the breastplate of righteousness in place, and our feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In every circumstance, may we take up the shield of faith and use it to extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. May we put on the helmet of salvation to guard our thinking and to use the sword of the Spirit, the very word of God, to drive back the enemy of our soul. Amen.
Then Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a helmet of bronze on
Justice Roberts, the 4 conservatives voting no. A 1-vote majority is easier to overturn. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. And boy, do we ever need some muscular Christianity right now. Yeah. You know, C.S. Lewis talked about the curse or the scourge of men without chests. He was talking about men that have no courage, that have no boldness, that have no conviction, that aren't willing to stand for anything, but instead fall for everything. And that's what we've got today, even in the Church of Jesus Christ. The Church of Jesus Christ today is flabby. It is weak. The Church of Jesus Christ today is being led by men that say what we ought to say is Black Lives Matter, and we never should say all lives matter. That's a Protestant pastor. That's the leader of the largest Protestant denomination, evangelical denomination in America, telling us whatever you say, do not say all lives matter. Even though that's what the Bible teaches, I don't want you to say it. I don't want anybody in this denomination to say it. So that's the kind of leadership we have right now in the Church of Jesus Christ. And what we need right now is we need men with chests. We need muscular Christians to serve in positions of leadership. We'll get to it in a moment. We need a Winston Churchill. I'm going to play an excerpt from a speech that Churchill delivered in World War II. And I look around and I say, where is our Winston Churchill? We need a Winston Churchill. Our nation needs a Winston Churchill. You know, those were dark days when Winston Churchill was prime minister, 1939 to 1945. Every night it was the Luftwaffe bombing London. And remember, we weren't in the war. They had no allies. Britain was standing by itself, standing alone. No help, no support, no allies. Winston Churchill was begging FDR for help, begging him, and could not get it. FDR did not get involved until Japan bombed us at Pearl Harbor, and then we had to get engaged. But until then, and Churchill knew that they couldn't alone stand against the might of Nazi Germany. He knew that if they were standing by themselves, they could not win. If America joined them, they could not lose. So it was a great day when America joined the battle, and Churchill knew it. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about this ruling, give you some information. We'll play some sound bites here, and then I want to pray again for us. This is extraordinarily important. And ladies and gentlemen, we have got to be people of prayer. The only way we are going to be able to withstand, the only way you and I are not going to capitulate to this, we must not surrender to this. We must not ever say, this is okay. We must not ever say what our president said, we'll just live with it. We must not ever say that. That is surrender. That is capitulation. We cannot, we must not, we will not do that. But in order to do that, we've got to be people of prayer. We have to be focused on God. We have to be trusting upon Him, trusting Him to infuse us with His strength and with His power. Now, we already went over Article 1, Section 3. There is no basis in the Constitution for this ruling. Zip. And, we elected Donald Trump to stop this. And he thought he was doing it by putting guys like Neil Gorsuch on the bench that we were told was not an activist. He was just going to apply the Constitution. He wasn't going to rewrite it. He wasn't going to overturn it. He was going to uphold it. Remember, the job of the Supreme Court is not to write law. Their job is to uphold the law. Their job is to take the law and the Constitution and apply it to the cases that are in front of them, not rewrite it if they don't like it. That's how we got into this mess that we're in. So anyway, a little bit of content here. This had to do with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Remember, that forbids discrimination on the basis of sex. The authors of that law, remember, we have to go back in time. What was in the mind of the people, the lawmakers, that crafted this law? What did they mean by the words? Not what can we twist and mangle them to mean, but what did they mean in 1964 when they used the word sex? They meant something very simple. They meant biological sex. You're not allowed to discriminate in employment on the basis of biological sex. Had nothing to do with sexual orientation, nothing to do with homosexuality, nothing to do with lesbianism. And and Congress has never changed that law. They've tried. I mean, that's how you're supposed to deal with this, by going through the legislative process. And the left has never had to do that. They haven't had to do that since 1947 because they can get everything they want because they have an activist judiciary. Now they've got it again. Neil Gorsuch and John Roberts leading the activist wing, the regressive wing of the Supreme Court. So that's what we're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen. So they just rewrote the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, and Clarence Thomas disagreed with this strongly. This is what they said in their dissent. The court tries to convince readers that it is merely enforcing the terms of the statute. That's the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But that is preposterous. So this is not just me saying this. This is Sam Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, Clarence Thomas saying that this ruling is absolutely preposterous. It's nuts. It's irrational. It is subrational. It is completely unconstitutional. They go on. Even as understood today, the concept of discrimination because of sex is different from discrimination because of sexual orientation or gender identity. Alita was the one that wrote the dissent. And they point out that most states do not enshrine special, unique protections in their state law for sexual orientation and gender identity. They just don't do it. 29 of them. A majority of the United States, the states that make up the United States, a majority of them have refused to provide special rights on the basis of sexually deviant behavior. And what the Supreme Court said yesterday, no, we are going to force you, you 29 states that have had the sense not to put this in law, we are going to force you, compel you to provide special, unique rights that are not available to anybody else, to provide special, unique rights that are based on sexually deviant behavior. John Roberts did that to us. Neil Gorsuch did that to us. So, Kennedy used to be the voice for gay rights on the court. Now it's going to be Neil Gorsuch and John Roberts, a terrible, terrible, horrible, no good, very bad tag team. And the GOP, the Republican Party, this is why I say we are in a dark day. And we've got to be the ones that carry the light of the truth, because the Republican Party, we elected these people to put a stop to this kind of nonsense. They're all behind it. They're 100% behind this ruling from the Supreme Court. Senator Deb Fischer, an embarrassment to her name. I've got a Deb Fischer in my life. She's a rock. But the Senator Deb Fischer from Nebraska is not. She said, I'm fine with it. It's important that we recognize that all Americans have equal rights under our Constitution. This is not about equal rights. This is about special rights. Let's be clear about this. Somebody brings up equal rights. This is not about equal rights. We all have equality of the rights that are granted to us in the Constitution. This is not one of them. This is special rights. Here's Chuck Grassley. This is embarrassing for the head of the Judiciary Committee. It's the law of the land. It probably makes uniform what a lot of states, well, 21 have done, and probably negates Congress's necessity for acting. He just gave away the game right there. Why is Grassley happy with this ruling? That means he and his fellow Republicans don't have to deal with this. The Supreme Court did their dirty work for them. So they're happy as clams. They're off the hook. He said he was not disappointed by Gorsuch's decision. Here is Senate Majority Whip John Thune. So this is a Majority Whip. This guy's in the leadership in the United States Senate. That's the one house that we control right now. He said this demonstrated Gorsuch's independence. I say, great, just what we want. A Supreme Court justice that is independent of the law, independent of common sense, independent of the Constitution, and independent of the dictionary. You can look up sex in the dictionary. It'll tell you what it means. So anyway, John Thune. Now, John Thune, this is what is grievously disappointing to me. You know where John Thune went to college? He went to Biola in Los. You know what Biola stands for? The Bible Institute of Los Angeles. That's where John Thune went to college. So he's supposed to be one of us. He's not supposed to be off reservation like this. He's not supposed to be renegade. He's not supposed to go rogue on an issue of this magnitude, but he has done that. Graduate of the Bible Institute of Los Angeles. Shame on you, Senator Fischer. Shame on you, Senator Grassley. And shame especially on you, Senator John Thune. Now here's Joel Pollack. He writes for Breitbart, which is a conservative website, but they're completely gone. They've sold out. They've gone over to the dark side of the force. This is what Joel Pollack said in Breitbart today. It is deeply significant that Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote the opinion in this Bostock case, because Gorsuch wrote a concurring opinion in Hobby Lobby which allowed private companies to exert religious freedom in denying contraceptive coverage under Obamacare. So what Pollack goes on to say, the court sent a clear message that it believes that religious freedom and LGBT rights can coexist. Joel Pollack, shame on you for believing this. This is absolutely, completely not true. LGBT rights and religious freedom cannot, absolutely cannot, coexist. Every time religious liberty advances, LGBT rights have to recede. And every time that the gay agenda, that the homosexual agenda advances, it does so at the expense of religious liberty. It is the church and it is people of faith who are going to be penalized and going to be punished and are going to suffer under the Supreme Court ruling, because the homosexual agenda and religious liberty cannot coexist. It's impossible, because both of them make total claims on our culture. They cannot coexist. Religious liberty is gone. If this ruling stands, and it will, who's going to stop them? The only thing that could stop them, and there is a way they could be stopped. There is a way they could be stopped. If the 29 governors whose states had the wisdom not to provide special protections on the basis of sexually deviant behavior, if they rose up and they said, well, that's fine, Justice Gorsuch has issued his opinion, but that's what it is. It is an opinion. Not even the Supreme Court calls what they produce rulings or the law. They even call themselves, they call them opinions. So opinion is something that you can take it or you can leave it. We need to have 29 governors, maybe just one of these governors, one governor that has a chest, that has some kind of conviction, some kind of courage about the moral values on which this nation was built, and would stand up and say, look, Neil Gorsuch has issued his opinion, now let him enforce it. Because realize the Supreme Court has no enforcement powers. They have opinion, but not will. They have no ability to coerce anybody to cooperate with their opinions. They can't compel anybody. They have no police force at their disposal that they can order, like a governor can send the state police out to enforce a law, to enforce an edict. The Supreme Court doesn't have anything like that. What they are entirely dependent upon is the compliant will of innocent, brain-dead sheep, which is what we have today in America. We are brain-dead sheep. If we ever accept this ruling, we ever agree with it. So anyway, that's Joel Pollack. He says this: politically, Gorsuch is telling America that people can express their religious faith as they choose and express their sexuality or gender as they choose. That is absolutely false. Why? Because expressing our religious faith is a what? It is a constitutional right. It is explicit in the Constitution. The right to free expression of religion shall not be infringed. So we exercise a constitutional right when we exercise our religious faith. He says they can express their sexuality or gender as they choose. No, that is not a constitutional right. These are not parallel. These are not equivalent. They're not in the same category at all. You know, some conservatives argued correctly that what Justice Gorsuch has done is abandoned the wisdom of Antonin Scalia, because he abandoned a textual approach to the issue of sexuality. Because what Scalia says, you have to look at the text. What does the text, what do the words say, and what do they mean? And the way you determine what they mean is by asking the people that wrote it. What did you mean when you used this word? Well, we know what the Senate meant in 1964 when they used the word sex. They mean what the dictionary said is male or female, and Gorsuch completely abandoned that. Now, you abandon textualism. If you abandon the text of the Constitution, if you abandon the text of the law as your God, then you are floating in space. You're like that guy in Gravity. You're untethered. You're floating away to outer space. You'll land on Mars before you land on a decent constitutional opinion. What Gorsuch said is that he was doing this because of the text of the statute. Only the written word is the law, and all persons are entitled to its benefit. Well, that means all you have to do is just redefine the words that you don't like, and then you can pretend to be a textualist.
Here's Twyla Brace with today's Health Freedom Minute.
Last
code SHARE to receive your additional savings. Maybe now is the time to make the switch, like more than 400,000 people already have, and start saving. Here it is. Call 833-44.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio, the home of the fastest 60 minutes in American media. I realize, ladies and gentlemen, I am amped up today. I am energized, and I do not apologize. Sometimes I kind of redline it, and I shouldn't. But I do not apologize for my level of energy today, because this is important. This is wrong. This is as wrong as anything in the United States of America could be. This is wronger than just about anything in our contemporary culture. So I'm worked up over it. Don't apologize for it. Here's a winnable war moment. 2 bystanders in Midland, Texas, saved a police officer's life. He was stuck in a wrestling match with a suspect in a parking lot, and the suspect was trying to gouge his eye out and go for his gun. So the guy and his female companion, he stopped, went over, and helped the officer. He grabbed the hand of the suspect who was going for the officer's gun and freed him from his eye gouge, and the officer was able to get free, grab his gun, and arrest the miscreant. So good for them. Not everybody in America has a mindless dislike or hatred for the police. Here's another winnable war moment. CNN. You know, the left, they recognize that it's a baby in the womb. And without realizing what they're doing, they even admit it. sometimes. You know, when regressives are pregnant, they talk about the baby. They don't talk about the thing that they're carrying. Their friends don't say, what are you going to name that clump of cells? Is it a boy or is it a girl? Not what are you going to name that chunk of protoplasm that you're carrying? It's a boy or it's a girl. They know it. It's a baby. And CNN was doing a feature for a Black Lives Matter activist who is pregnant, and she wrote a 750-word piece talking about her unborn baby. That's what she called it, and how excited she was to welcome the baby into the world. I didn't read the whole thing, but it's great. It starts off, I'm now in the beginning stages of my second trimester. During this time of pregnancy is when you're beginning to move your arms and legs, and you have all of your fingers and toes. So it's a you. It's not a thing that she's writing this letter to. It's a you. It's a person. Your facial features are becoming more defined. My stomach is starting to become more noticeable. Your dad and I should be thinking about who you will look like more when we feel you kick for the first time, whether you are a boy or a girl. Now, CNN wanted to feature this and to be worth featuring, but in the cryon for this piece, the interview with this woman, they subtitled it, A Letter to My Beautiful Black Unborn Baby. That's CNN. What does CNN call it? A beautiful black unborn baby. And then even below that, it says, expectant black mother pens powerful letter to unborn child. It's a child. It's a baby. Even CNN admits it when nobody is looking, or when they think nobody is looking. Here's another item from our Insanity Chronicles. You know, people are homeschooling now because they have to, so they're doing digital learning, and some spy was at the school where providing the instruction for this family. Some snitch in the school office noticed that one of the homes during a virtual class session had a BB gun in the background. It was a BB gun. Wasn't a hunting rifle. Wasn't an AR-15. Wasn't even a .22. It was a BB gun. They called the police. And the next thing this family knew, there was an officer at their door looking to arrest somebody for having unauthorized firearms in the house. So that's the insanity that we are dealing with. But anyway, Gorsuch wrote that only the written word is the law. That's Gorsuch writing. Only the written word is the law, and all persons are entitled to its benefit. Okay, what is the written word? The written word is sex, which means male or female. That, Neil Gorsuch, according to your own words, that is the law, and only the written word is the law. Not the definition that you make up, not the definition that you substitute for it, not the definition that you completely rewrite, not the word that you redefine because you don't like the word that you find in the law, and you don't like the definition that you find in the dictionary. You know, and Alito and Clarence Thomas accused Gorsuch of legislating from the bench. And Justice Kavanaugh basically did the same thing. Now listen to this. I want to talk about some of the implications of this. I'm going to play a couple of sound bites. But Gorsuch said that, well, it's not Gorsuch saying this. This is Pollack writing. This probably, note the word, probably would not apply to religious organizations. But we do not know that because religious liberty is not addressed in the opinion. So we do not know if this applies to religious organizations or if they're going to be allowed to be what the Supreme Court has defined as a bigot, as a homophobe, as a hate monger. That's what the Supreme Court has done here. Their ruling identifies Christians as bigots. You get to be bigots. We're not going to let anybody else be a bigot when it comes to homosexuals and lesbians and transgenders, but we are going to let you be a bigot. So you're the only ones in America that get to be homophobes and bigots. So anyway, it's just about as bad, like I said, as this could possibly be. All right, let's play some sound bites. Let's go to Carrie Severino. She's the president of the Judicial Crisis Network. She worked closely with the Federalist Society to get judges that supposedly we were convinced were going to be constitutionalists. You know, even Donald Trump has said that this thing is fine. Did you know that? Donald Trump said that this ruling is fine. We will live with it. Let me find. I don't know what I did with my article on that, but Donald Trump signed off on this thing. So here's Carrie Severino, clip number 1, and here is her prediction about what is going to happen. She is absolutely right. Clip number 1.
These questions are going to create a tsunami of new litigation and create a huge amount of uncertainty going forward. I think you're going to see these decisions going overwhelmingly in favor of the litigants, the plaintiffs who are challenging any religious organization or any school or anyone who wants to maintain a traditional, biologically based, scientific based understanding of sex. I think that's part of the strategy of the activists, because they know that many of these organizations, they can't afford to pay for defense. They can't afford to risk a negative judgment where they could face crippling fines. If you're talking about individuals, you know, you've seen what's happened with cases like the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, et cetera, where someone's entire business and livelihood could be destroyed, and where they can face, you know, even personal threats and real concern over their own safety if they are willing to carry on litigation.
So he says, look, this is the end of religious liberty. This is what Carrie Severino is saying. This is the end of religious liberty in America, because the religious defendant is going to lose every single time. So a transgender or a lesbian walks into Jack Phillips' Masterpiece Cake Shop, wants a cake to celebrate a homosexual wedding or a transgender wedding, and Jack Phillips politely declines. He's going to get sued, and he's going to wind up bankrupt and in jail. Jack Phillips loses every time, thanks to Neil Gorsuch and John Roberts. Now, the question is, like I say, there's no guarantee of any kind of religious protections in the Supreme Court's ruling. And trust me about this, ladies and gentlemen, AFA will be sued. We're a religious organization. That's not going to stop LGBT activists from suing us to try to shut us down and put our leadership in chains. They will do it, and they're virtually guaranteed to win. FRC is going to get sued. And we can say, well, we have First Amendment rights as a religious organization. They'll say, no, you don't, because you're not a church. See, they believe First Amendment rights only apply to a church. We're not a church. We are an organization. We endorse candidates, and that's what they will say. You guys are all about politics. You can't hide behind the skirts of Neil Gorsuch on this, because you're all about politics. You endorse candidates. You put out voters' guides. You weigh in all the time on political issues. So you have got to start hiring homosexuals and lesbians and fake men and fake women, or we are going to take you out. We are going to take you to court, and we are going to demolish you, and we are going to shut your organization down. And our whole point is for voting for Trump was so this wouldn't happen. We're trying to protect everybody from this, and now that shield is gone with Neil Gorsuch going completely off reservation. Now realize what this means. This means all of the common sense policies, executive orders that Donald Trump put into place about transgenderism, about homosexuality, those are gone. We talked yesterday about the fact that on Friday, Donald Trump said to this homeless shelter in Anchorage that had a man saying he was a woman, went in there and slept with these women in a homeless shelter, showered with them. These women that had suffered some kind of trauma, which is why they're homeless and in a shelter. They can't even afford a roof over their own heads. Now, to add to that, They're allowing this naked guy to come in there and use the same showers, use the same bathrooms. If Trump tries that again, that's it. That'll be challenged, and President Trump and those protections will lose every single solitary time. Well, let's play clip number 2, Carrie Severino.
There are circumstances where it is either relevant to the job qualifications or where it's going to be an issue of conscience, and those are the ones where you're going to have people who are going to be forced to make those tough choices between violating their own conscience and possibly losing their livelihood.
All right, so that's going to be Jack Phillips. He's going to have a choice to make, and he's going to have to make it very soon because he's going to be sued before the ink is dry on the Supreme Court ruling. And Jack Phillips will have to decide, do I maintain my livelihood and feed my family, or do I violate my conscience? That's the choice he's going to be faced with. That is a choice that nobody in America ever ought to confront. But thanks to Neil Gorsuch and John Roberts, now every Christian business owner is going to have to face this dilemma. All right, clip number 3, Carrie Severino.
What the Supreme Court did is, in an opinion, they basically just rewrote what that text said, because there is a longstanding history where, for decades, as I said, no politician, for decades, no judge said that language meant sexual orientation as well. That's really revisionist reading of the statute, dressed up as textualism. And that's one of the things I think is so dangerous here, because if we have laws that a court can effectively rewrite what it means, even though no legislator who passed it would have thought it meant that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say this is a dark day, and we are in the fight of our lives. We are now fighting for the survival of Christian civilizations. That's what Churchill fought for in World War II. Said this war is a fight for the survival of Christian civilization. We lose this war and the Nazis win. We descend into a darkness like we've never seen before. And here's what Churchill said in 1941. He was speaking at a school. I don't know if it was a graduation ceremony or what, but here's Winston Churchill. Dark days, 1941, dark days in World War II. They were losing at this point. Here's what Churchill had to say, clip R1.
This is the lesson. Never give in. Never give in. Never, never, never. In nothing, great or small, large or petty, never give in except to convictions of honor and good sense. Never yield to force. Never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy. We stood all alone a year ago, and to many countries it seemed that our account was closed. We were finished. All this tradition of ours, our school history, our songs, this part of the history of our country, all were gone and finished and liquidated. Very different is the mood today. Britain, other nations thought, had drawn a sponge across her slate, but instead our country stood in the gap. There was no flinching, no thought of giving in, and by what seemed almost a miracle to those outside these islands, though we ourselves never doubted it, we now find ourselves in a position where I say we can be sure that we have only to persevere to conquer.
I want us to pray again. We're in a fight for our lives, ladies and gentlemen, and we have to fight this battle on our knees. Let's pray. Lord, I pray that you will open the eyes of your church and our entire nation to the reality of spiritual warfare, that we may not be ignorant of the schemes of the devil, but instead may resist him and demolish the strongholds he has established in our lives and our culture. Teach us that we can only stand firm by praying at all times in the Spirit with every kind of prayer and request. May we always be aware of the spiritual battle we are in, keep alert, always keep on praying, not only for ourselves, but for others.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American